Welcome to the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Boom! Boom! Let's get started here. The Steroids Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Guide to ROIDS, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, for the first time in bodybuilding history, you have someone with no corporate interests and no obligation to please anyone, not walking on eggshells to not offend. Ultimate Guide to ROIDS gives you the information, the whole truth, not a full truth and a half truth, full truth. Ultimate Guide to ROIDS gives you the keys to the Lamborghini, gives you the information, and lets you decide what to do with it. It's a crime this information has been suppressed this long. Now let's get on with the podcast.
Okay, welcome to episode 40 of the Steroids Podcast. Been a good time recording these for you guys. Have had a lot of feedback that the podcast is something you looking forward to the new episode. So that makes me feel good because, you know, I see that producing something that you guys enjoy and give you something to look forward to. Cool. I like that. I wanted to talk about vaccines a little bit, actually, because I've been getting questions about them. People have been asking me, what do you think of vaccines? And so let's just talk before we get into the steroids questions, what are vaccines? So vaccines, the traditional vaccines that have always been around are what they are is a dead bioorganism, so a virus or a bacteria, etc. And it's inactivated, so it's not alive, and that's why it normally doesn't get you sick unless there was something messed up with the manufacturing. And then that is combined with something called an adjuvant. And an adjuvant is a toxin that promotes a strong immune response in the body, or like a shock immune response. And so the dead virus, they want to get you a really strong immune response to the dead virus. So the adjuvant is like a stimulus to really shock the immune system and get it active when that dead bioorganism is in there, the disease that they're trying to vaccinate you against. The problem why people get side effects from vaccines, why there's a lot of government pressure not to say that vaccines can do something bad, but there's countless examples of people having getting paralyzed, getting sick, having autism, having allergies, autoimmune diseases, etc. from getting vaccines. So let's explain quickly why something like that could happen. Basically, a lot of these ingredients that go into the vaccines, a lot of the ingredients for any kind of medication that you use comes from some type of oil, some type of biological oil, and then chemical reactions are done to it in order to make it into a certain chemical. So, for example, testosterone. Testosterone comes from soybean oil. They start with a cholesterol molecule from soybeans, and they do chemical reactions to that cholesterol molecule until it becomes testosterone. So the testosterone that you inject, it's based off of soybeans. That's where it came from, was soybeans. So with other kinds of medications, this is also the case. Not all, but many of them, and also ingredients. So when they actually are creating the dead virus's genome or etc., what they're doing in the vaccine, it may not have come from something like that, from an oil, but there may be ingredients in the vaccine that were derived from something like peanuts or something like soybeans, etc. And so when you have that original thing that the ingredient came from, and then you have that adjuvant in there creating this hyperimmune response, your body can then create a learned immune response to whatever else was included in the vaccine. And also it can have an immune response to some things that happen in your own body naturally, attacking your own body. Because the point of a vaccine is to create learned memory in your immune system. So whatever's going on in your body when that adjuvant gets in there, if you're someone who has a sensitivity, it can give you a learned memory to whatever was going on in your body that time, so it can make the body attack itself, autoimmune diseases, give you allergies to peanuts, etc. And, there's a lot of pressure, to not say that's what's happening. Okay. I don't want to get too into vaccines or how much proof there is or whatever with that, that's happening. But there is to just put the least into it as I can. I will say that there's a lot of anecdotal reports, being thousands and thousands of anecdotal reports of these things happening from people. So with the coronavirus vaccine that they're creating, though, this is a different kind of vaccine that's never been used before. It's a completely different type of a way of creating immunity than the traditional vaccines. So this is something new. It's based on actually the same way that growth hormone is manufactured from rDNA technology, recombinant DNA technology. Growth hormone is manufactured, as we've discussed on the podcast, from genetically engineering viruses and inserting them into E. coli bacteria to change the DNA of the E. coli bacteria. And then the E. coli bacteria then produces human growth hormone as a response. So that's an example of rDNA technology. And so with the coronavirus vaccines, these are rDNA vaccines. And so what they contain is they contain a segment of genetic code, genetic material, and that goes into your cells, and then it leaves that genetic material in your DNA. So what your DNA has now, these new things called rDNA vaccines, they will add something new to your DNA that you didn't have before. And the premise behind this is that what they will be adding to your DNA is a bit of DNA that shows your body how to produce what it needs to produce to battle a coronavirus. Okay, so the immunity that one would get when they were had a coronavirus infection and then fought it off, they are trying to inject a new bit of DNA into you, and then it goes through all the cells in your bodies, and then your body becomes like a factory of producing. All your different cells now have this new DNA in them, and they produce the antidote to the coronavirus. So that's just a little crash course on how vaccines work, what vaccines are, guys. And there's a lot of talk about the new coronavirus vaccine. And so that one's a little different. There's never been a vaccine that's used rDNA technology before. So wanted to go over that real quickly since it's been being asked about. Something else also that people have asked about was... what did you say back when you didn't? They've been asking me, what did you tell people back when you didn't tell people that you used steroids? What did you tell them when they would ask you about, why were you getting so big? What's the secret? Are you on steroids, etc.? And you know what? That's an uncomfortable thing, because if you're not willing to say what you're doing, and there's quite a lot of reasons to not be willing to say what you're doing, you're not obligated to tell anyone anything, but you are going to be lying if you're not, if you say some other reason when you know that the main reason is that you're taking steroids. So, if you say it's your diet, your keto diet, or whatever, and there's like an elephant in the room, but the other guys don't know better. They're like, how are you getting like this, man? How are you changing? It's like, well, I've been on my keto diet. And then they all start keto dieting or something. And they're never going to look like you, though. That's what happens with a lot of the fake natties on social media too. So, you know what? I always hated that. I always hated not being able to be upfront or honest about, being on steroids. So it was about the first couple years that I used steroids. I wasn't upfront about what I was doing when people would ask. I wasn't comfortable talking about it. Now I am, obviously. Asking for advice though on what to say. I really don't have any advice on what to say, other than that you just say you've been working out for a long time, and you kind of like what Jay Cutler said, like, you got that edge, like, how to do this. There's really not much you can say. It's not going to be comfortable if you're not willing to say what you're doing, because there's going to be an elephant in the room. And then the other thing was that I've had a couple guys ask, what do you tell like your wife or your girlfriend or some girls that are angry about you taking steroids or something, or wanting to take steroids? And the main thing that you should be able to say, and this should completely disarm them, is that steroids, anabolic steroids, are male hormones. They're testosterone and derivatives of testosterone. And birth control, pills, shots, etc., are all female steroids, estrogen and progesterone, and derivatives of estrogen and progesterone. So females are taking steroids. Most females in this world use steroids. They're using the female version. Bodybuilders are using the male version of steroids. There's the female version, estrogen, progesterone, and then there's the male version, testosterone. And so, if they've ever used any kind of birth control, that would be such a huge hypocritical thing to be angry at you for using testosterone or other steroids, because they, in fact, use steroids and probably have been for a lot of years. And that, I mean, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it, man. Is that if they throw steroids at females because it's obviously a cultural thing, and they're like, oh, you have acne? Here's some steroids, and they put them on birth control. They put them on their female steroids, and you have cramps when you have your period. Here's some steroids. It's like any reason at all, just put them on steroids. They're just like, take these fucking steroids to girls, and it's very society acceptable. And if anyone says something about like, oh, you shouldn't take your birth control, it's like, what are you talking about, you insane person, getting into my business? And my birth control should be free and should be paid for by the government and all this shit. It's my human rights. And then they're like getting mad at you if you want to take your steroids. Like, that doesn't make sense at all. Okay, so that's pretty much it. If any women are ever asking you about steroids, just, dude, birth control, that is steroids. You're taking the male version. They're taking the female version. Facts of life. All right. So let's get to the first question of the day. It was a very good one. Carter asks, "Hey man, love the podcast. I was just wondering though why you never really talk about the importance of genetics in bodybuilding. You always say steroids are the foundation of bodybuilding, then nutrition, then training. But none of those is the foundation. Genetics is. Doesn't matter how many steroids someone does, if you don't have good genetics for growing muscle, they won't put on nearly as much muscle as someone who does. Anyway, enjoying the podcast, but that one thing was really bothering me." Yeah, so I appreciate the question. So bodybuilding is very different than other sports. I've talked about several times about how other sports steroids are real sports, are steroids are just the finishing touches. But when it comes to bodybuilding, physique, changing the way your body looks, the genetics are definitely not the primary component. And so let me tell you why this is. Bodybuilding is based on gaining weight and losing weight and then being on hormones while you do that. So as we can see from just looking around us, any person has the ability to eat like a pig and get up to 300 pounds, get up to 250 pounds, 350 pounds, etc. Most people can do that. There are some people that have, metabolisms that prevent them from doing that to some degree. But, usually if they get enough liquid food in, they can do that, enough liquid energy. And then the same thing is that if you starve a person for a prolonged period of time, you can bring their body weight down. Okay. And so what happens when you use steroids is that you're manipulating the hormonal environment, the metabolic environment in the body that says what tissue goes on when you gain weight and what tissue goes off when you lose weight. So since we already know that anybody can eat their way up to 300 pounds, well, if you put them on steroids and you put them on enough steroids, well, there's going to be an insane amount of muscle mass gain going from something like 150 to 300 pounds. And they're going to look like a bodybuilder. And then with the cutting as well, you put them on the right steroids and you put them on some trenbolone so that they're not losing muscles, and you make them lose weight, and they're going to lose fat and they're going to get cut up. The thing that I think people get confused with is that some people, they're talking about dosages. You got these guys saying I'm gifted and this is why I use low dosages. Guys, that's really smoke and mirrors. So there is some small differences in dosages between person to person. Like, one guy might need 1,500 milligrams to get to this level, and another guy might only need 1,000 milligrams, right? But it's not the kind of difference as like one guy needs 125 milligrams and the other guy needs 1,500 milligrams. Okay. It's not a massive tenfold difference like that. It's a relatively small difference. There's been studies using steroids on humans from 0 milligrams and then in increments all the way up to 10,000 milligrams per week of various different steroids. And the gains are linear gains as you increase the dosage. The muscle mass and strength has a linear effect going up. It's a straight line. It's not a line with any kind of diminishing returns, okay? And so that's from all study participants, not just some study participants. People respond to drugs in a certain way. Everybody that drinks alcohol responds in a fairly similar way. Some people are a little bit more sensitive to the effects, and some are less sensitive to the effects. Some are better able to handle it without getting sick, etc. But the same thing, but everybody gets the same general effect from drinking alcohol. The same thing with any other drugs. Any other drugs that you might use, medications, Tylenol, ibuprofen, okay? We know what these substances do, and we know what approximate dosages have certain effects in the body. And it's no exception for testosterone. So when you're talking about, getting big, becoming a bodybuilder, and then, becoming shredded, and using these hormones, genetics definitely are not a important factor at all. They're so unimportant, actually. It's really a very minor thing. On the other hand, what you look like is dependent on your genetics. So if you're talking about a certain look, as in what you think is a beautiful body or something, if you really want a beautiful body, that is genetic dependent. The shape of your muscles, the insertions of your muscles, the width of your bones, stuff like that. That's genetically dependent. So the steroids and stuff, they won't change that. If you grow up, if you're born with the way your chest looks, the way that the angles are, you don't like the shape of it, well, then steroids aren't going to change that for you. You can still get a big one. You gain enough weight and take enough steroids and gain enough strength, you can still get a big chest. But the way it looks is not going to, it's not going to change as far as the shape of it. Or someone with a certain ab genetics, they don't like the way that their abs look. That would be another thing where, genetics came in, but it wouldn't prevent them from being able to have a six pack or being able to have developed abs, things like that. And then, different people have different amounts of fast twitch or slow twitch muscle fiber in certain areas on their bodies. Some people have a lot of fast twitch, high growable muscle fiber on their arms, or some have it on their back, their chest, their legs. This is called weak points and strong points, which is just, again, normal genetic variation. And this is where you get the different proportions of the body again, the proportions of the body, which is then dictating, how it looks, how the end result looks. But it's not dictating, whether or not that person is gaining a huge amount of muscle and whether they can be ripped. Being able to be really big and really muscular or being able to be really ripped is not genetically dependent. So anyone can be a bodybuilder, and anyone can be big and muscular. Anyone can be lean. Those are not dependent on genetics. So that's a very interesting thing about bodybuilding. So I think that pretty much clears that question about genetics up. So definitely steroids are the foundation of bodybuilding and diet. What you look like, you really shouldn't be worrying too much about that, though. That's really stuff that you can't change as far as the genetic shape of your body, just like you can't change the genetic shape of your face. The width of certain bones, if you don't like your hip bones or you don't like your clavicle or something. That's really feminine to be worrying about stuff like that and being depressed about stuff like that. Like, oh, I was born with my hip bones and they're not the right hip bones. I wish they were smaller. Or my clavicle isn't wide enough and I'm depressed because I can't look the way I want to, and having a fit or something about it. Like, what a pussy. If it's normal though for people to go through stuff like that, especially like younger guys, teenagers, etc., not comfortable with their bodies yet, but you are who you are. And the best way to do it is to get big, get strong, and get lean. And then, like the shape that you have. Maybe it's not one of these shapes that is really appealing to the eye and streamlined, but if it's not, you can still build a really powerful and strong look, and that's really the only thing that matters. If you're a man, you shouldn't. We talked about this in other episodes. Being worried about how beautiful you are and thinking that this is the really important quality. That's very feminine and very unmasculine. It's not a becoming trait. That's not going to, it doesn't reflect well on you, to be really worried about, your eyebrows and your hair, and it needs to be perfect, and your clavicle needs to be the perfect width, and your hips need to be the perfect, and you don't like the shape of this on you. It's not good, Focus on being big and powerful, and just you, the best version of you. Okay, so that's how genetics ties in with bodybuilding. Mainly just depends on what you look like, and a lot of people have some kind of idealized picture in their mind of what they want to look like. A lot of it has to do a lot of times with they think like that will get them sex or something. If they can look like that guy they've seen, then they're going to be able to have more sex with the people they want to have sex with. And it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. When you have the perfect body that you want, The people that you want to have sex with aren't going to come running to you asking you to have sex with them, or faint when you ask, when you want to get to know them and have sex with them. It might help you get your foot in the door a little bit, but it's not going to have the effect that your fantasy has created, that when you get this body, then you're going to get the sex with the people you want to have sex with. That might be true with women, but it's not true with men, okay? It's not. It might be true if you're gay. I don't know. But it's not. It's certainly not if you're straight. All right. Let's get on to the next question. Sucking on Teats asks, anonymous question for the podcast. I'm in the military and thinking about getting on my first cycle to just look good and regain some motivation in the gym. 500 test for 16 weeks with 20 milligrams Dbol for the first 4 weeks. 0.5 milligram Arimidex every other day. Do I have to worry about this showing up on a drug test? Okay, well, to answer that question, no. Normal drug tests don't test for steroids, like recreational drug tests. You have to take specific test for steroids to be tested for steroids and have it come up on a test. And you also have to be on that test. You have to be specifically tested for each steroid that you could possibly be on. So if you get a steroid test and you're on Winstrol, but that steroid test isn't exactly testing for Winstrol, then it's not going to come up on the test. So steroid tests are not routinely applied. They're very rare to be applied for something like a recreational drug test. Usually it has to be like, oh, okay, we want to test this guy for steroids, and it's expensive for them to do it because they have to test for every single steroid to see if some steroid comes up on the test, then, that's what you're on. And then, so it's a special order steroid test. So definitely no, being on some steroids, unless you're being specifically tested for steroids, is not going to come up on a drug test. So then the next question he has is, what are the best ways to prevent infections? That's probably the thing I'm most hesitant about because my healthcare is regulated by the military. So I need to prevent any health problems to prevent it from affecting my career. Okay. Well, whenever you break the skin, and put needles inside of you, there is a minute chance of having some kind of an infection. That's why the first thing that you do before you take any injections is you wipe it with alcohol. The alcohol kills the bacteria on the surface of the skin. Most infections, there can be dirty gear. Gear that is not pharmaceutical grade is more likely. Pharmaceutical grade gear does not have any kind of bacteria inside. But gear that is UGL could possibly have some in there. And that's usually why UGL gear gives more post-injection pain, is because to prevent or to make up for the fact that the manufacturing environment that they're using is not as sterile as a pharmaceutical grade product. They use more sterilants inside of the steroids. So more percentage of the oily solution that you're going to inject is going to be alcohol based. A higher percentage of alcohol in the steroid solution. And that is irritating to your muscles, which is why generally UGL gear gives more post-injection pain than pharmaceutical grade gear. But with the preventing the infection, you got to make sure that the bacteria on the surface of your skin is dead, so that when you push the muscle through, or you push the needle through your skin down into your muscle, you're not pushing any bacteria from the surface of the skin down into there. So that's the main way that you can prevent an infection. Some people do they will filter their gear at home. They'll use a filter, which is a syringe-like filter, which is pretty common, but not commonly available, but not common to use. And another way that people do like an extra step would be to bake their gear at something like 175, 200 degrees in the oven, obviously airing out the small vial with a thick needle, like a 16 gauge or 18 gauge needle, so that air can escape, or else it'll explode from the hot air being inside the small vial and expanding. Has to be some way for that air to escape. But they'll do that, if they have these could be extra precautions that I'm talking about for somebody that is, really afraid of an infection and, not confident in the sterility of their gear. And they're trying to do extra, whatever they can to make that not happen. These kind of things could be done. But again, the main thing is just having a sterile product, having a well-made sterile product. Having a trust in the manufacturer, and it's definitely most easy to trust pharmaceutical grade manufacturers. But that definitely doesn't mean that all UGLs are not sterile. I mean, obviously not. Quite, so I'm just saying that there's less risk. Okay? You're always going to be taking a risk, though. Because like I said, anytime you break the skin and put something down into you, you have the risk of plunging bacteria with that needle deep into you. So that's just even in hospitals. Sometimes people get infections from the nurses giving them injections. That's part of it. If you do get an infection, though, if you have antibiotics on hand, there's a really strong antibiotic, azithromycin, 1,000 milligrams. If you keep that on hand and you're starting to get an infection, it's very broad spectrum. So basically, any different kind of bacteria that is in you causing an infection, you take the Zithromax, and it can usually kill whatever that is if you're starting to get an infection, and then it will go away if you took that. So that these are different ways that you can deal with that. If you really had to keep it away from your employer medical coverage, I guess you'd have to pay out of pocket and go to a private service provider, So there's different ways that somebody might handle a situation like what you're talking about. Okay, next question is from Dominic. Hi, Dan. I've been listening to you for a long time, and all your advice has been good. I have a question for you. High testosterone plus any 19 NOR, so Trenbolone or Deca or Ment, Testosterone, those are all 19 NORs. He asks, should I take Caber and Arimidex? Okay, so whenever you take testosterone or something that is converting to estrogen, so for example, Ment, Testosterone converts to estrogen, Deca converts a little bit to estrogen, and Trenbolone does not convert to estrogen, and testosterone does. So if you ever put testosterone, paired with estrogen or paired with Trenbolone, then you would definitely need to use an anti-estrogen. If you use Trenbolone alone, you would not need to use an anti-estrogen. But then these other ones, Testosterone and Deca, it would definitely be the right thing to do, the wise decision to have an anti-estrogen on hand. And then if you're pairing them with testosterone, absolutely, because testosterone produces estrogen, and that doesn't change whether in the presence of any other steroids you want. There's some rumors that Masteron prevents estrogen conversion, and there may be some very small anti-estrogen effects of Masteron, but it's mostly from blocking the effects of estrogen at the receptor, not preventing it from converting and being in the body. But it's not very effective, okay? Anti-estrogens are much stronger than something like Masteron or Proviron, and they actually take the estrogen out of the body instead of just block its effects. So they're very effective. If you're using Cabergoline, if you're using Deca and you're using testosterone, you need to have Cabergoline on hand too, because if you do get progesterone, prolactin effects from the Deca, the Arimidex won't be able to touch those. So say you start getting Deca Gyno or Deca Dick, where you can't finish during sex, or it's hard to get an erection. you can take as much Arimidex as you want, or Gyno, Deca Gyno, Deca Tits. You can take as much Arimidex as you want, and it won't affect or have any effect or do anything to help you until you have that Cabergoline in there solving the progesterone prolactin issue, and then your estrogen will be able to start doing its thing. Same thing with Trenbolone. You're running testosterone and Trenbolone. You're taking Arimidex to make your estrogen stay low from the testosterone. Well, if you start getting Tren Gyno, you can take as much Arimidex, as much Nolvadex as you want, but that's not going to be taking your prolactin levels down that are going up from the Trenbolone. And you're going to have Gyno, and it's going to keep on progressing until you get something to bring down your prolactin levels, such as pramipexole or Cabergoline. You say when you're using high test plus any 19 nor, should you take Caber and Arimidex? The answer is yes. You should have both on hand. You don't want to use Caber though unless you need it. So, a few times people ask me, how do you know you need Caber? Well, if you can't finish during sex, you need Caber. And then another one is if you get a deep, stinging, painful feeling gyno, not a hot, itching gyno on the surface, but a deep, stinging, painful gyno, you definitely need Cabergoline. All right, and then the next question is from Forged. He asks, this is also a similar question, can NPP, nandrolone phenylpropionate, cause Deca Dick? If so, any remedy for it? And yes, it can. NPP, nandrolone phenylpropionate, is the fast-acting form of Deca. Deca is nandrolone decanoate, and the decanoate or the phenylpropionate are the esters attached to the hormone nandrolone, and the ester dictates how fast it becomes available, active in your body, and then how long it stays in your body, how quickly it decays while it's in your body. So NPP has very similar effects to Deca. It feels a little bit different because the speed at which the hormone gets into your body makes a difference in the way that it consciously feels, and especially like the mental effects it can have. But the hormone is the same. The nandrolone, it's both nandrolone, so they can both absolutely cause Deca Dick. And if you do have Deca Dick, you will be able to solve that from taking Cabergoline. Deca Dick, Tren Dick, you can solve it by taking Cabergoline. The normal dosage that is usually used is 0.5 milligram twice per week. Cabergoline is very long acting, so you only need to take it twice per week, like Monday, Thursday. If you can take less and it's fine for you, that's good. If you have to take a little bit more, like 3 times per week, 0.5 milligram, that's okay too. But in my opinion, but I wouldn't go up more than that. Cabergoline has some negative effects. It can affect your heart negatively if taken at high dosages for long periods of time. And the dosages that I'm talking about for that is 4.5 milligrams and up, or 300 milligrams plus lifetime dosage. So, you want to be sparing with Cabergoline. You want to use the least possible you can use, and not using it all the time. And, that's another reason, too, not to go crazy on the 19 Nors. 19 Nors, very strong, very effective, can cause cardiovascular effects, though, if really used and abused for long periods of time. Okay, Dillfit asks, hey, if I could ask, I'm getting gyno bad from prolactin. I'm guessing due to the Tren I'm using, and my AI ain't touching it. Is that because I need Cabergoline and tamoxifen as well? Yeah, I like these questions because we're really getting a good spectrum feel on 19 Nors and how you can deal with the side effects that you get from those. So, Yeah, so you're taking trenbolone, you're taking testosterone, you're getting gyno, and you've been using an AI, so Arimidex or exemestane or letrozole, and it's not doing anything to stop your gyno. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can stop taking your tren until the gyno goes away. Or you could lower the dosage to make it easier to deal with Cabergoline. What you need is you need Cabergoline. You need to get those prolactin, progesterone levels under control. You need to get them down. And then at that point, then your AI will be able to shrink it. And tamoxifen, which is Nolvadex, also will be able to help shrink it. But if you've got Tren Gyno, Deca Gyno, you will need to use Cabergoline first or pramipexole first before you can get that gyno to go away with something like tamoxifen, Nolvadex, and AI. It's very essential. So, you guys, when you run trenbolone, when you run Deca, a lot of times it's like, oh well, I don't need that. I don't need that. Don't start unless you got the Cabergoline on hand, man, or the pramipexole on hand. I did that my first cycle too, and I chemically castrated myself for like about a week, and I had to put in like an overnight order for pramipexole to get myself some pramipexole to fix my chemical castration. I had a noodle. It couldn't get erect. So that was pretty funny, and that's happened to so many guys that I know too, because they started the Tren or the Deca without thinking like, I'll be okay. All right, next question is from Patrick. Hey Dan, I've heard a lot of people say you need to eat over maintenance to grow on high testosterone only, 1,000 milligrams plus per week. Is this true, or can I just eat and maintenance and grow as well? Is it smart to grow this way, just blasting high test, as this is what I've been doing? It's going to be hard to make major body recomposition changes, trading fat weight for muscle weight, staying the same weight with testosterone only, because we've talked about this before. If you were to put the effects of testosterone on an equalizer for an audio, like low, mid, high, it's pretty equal all the way around in its effects. It doesn't really have a specific effect on certain nutrients. It just has a pretty even basic effect on all nutrients. Something like adding Winstrol in has a very potent carbohydrate partitioning effect. Trenbolone does too. And both of those chemicals, you add them in, and it becomes a lot easier to trade fat weight for muscle weight than it would be on just testosterone. And also bulking on just testosterone, you're going to gain more fat than if you had, one of those partitioners, Anadrol, Winstrol, Superdrol, Trenbolone, Deca in there that have a high specific effect on something like carbohydrates and partitioning those to muscle and away from fat. Doing only testosterone is the healthiest way to do it. Only testosterone and only growth hormone. So for long-term health, what you're doing is the best way to do it. Doing short bursts, though, with other highly nutrient partitioning steroids would be very beneficial to you, though, in making gains. All right, the next question is from Bradley. The book Ultimate Guide to ROIDS is a godsend. I love it. I'm currently blasting on 200 milligrams testsipinate per week and got off. Oh, no, you're cruising on 200 milligrams testsipinate per week and got off a blast of 750 test C and 50 milligrams Winstrol for 10 weeks with awesome results. Good cycle. My question for the podcast is the following. I have had a ton of guides tell me to take Anavar with my Winstrol for better results. Are they synergistic, and is it beneficial to take both at the same time? And do you have to adjust the dosages of either? Yeah. when you know, stacking oral steroids works so good. A few people say, have asked me before, will it do anything to stack orals? You know, will that have a good effect? And the answer is hell yeah. It has a very powerful effect, stacking different orals together. And Anavar and Winstrol especially, they have a great synergistic effect. Say you were taking 50 milligrams of Winstrol, I definitely think you would have the best results on 30 milligrams Anavar, 30 milligrams Winstrol together. That's a good way to do it. You should experiment though. Experimenting with this stuff and finding out exactly what works the best for you makes a big difference. Most people though are going to respond best to taking more different types of steroids all at the same time, rather than at lower dosages, rather than taking only one or two steroids at one time and taking really high dosages of those one or two. The reason for that being is that each steroid has different ways of affecting your metabolism. And when they affect your metabolism, they have nutrient partitioning pathways in how you process your food, how you digest your food, where it goes to, what cells it goes to, what cells it stays away from, different metabolic effects like that, chemical things happening in your body. So when you take all the different kinds of steroids all together at the same time, even at low dosages, you can get all these different signals going into your body that help each of their characteristic effects to affect your metabolism. And that works really good. So different steroids, oral steroids, for example, that I think work really good stacked. Winstrol goes really good with basically anything, especially with stuff like Dbol. You'll get real bloated and a thick skin on Dbol, but big. But there'll be water between your muscle and your skin. And if you add in Winstrol with the Dbol, it will move a lot of that water that is in the skin outside the muscle. It will move the water into the muscle. So then you'll look a lot better. The Winstrol having kind of a balancing effect on the Dbol like that. You'll look big still from the Dbol, but you'll look leaner because the Winstrol moved a lot of that Dbol water from the skin to the muscle. Another good one is Winstrol with Anadrol. Winstrol with pretty much anything. I mean, Winstrol is a really good one to just combine 20, 30, 50 milligrams with any other oral steroid. Anadrol and Dbol is good. Superdrol and Anadrol is good. Superdrol and Winstrol is good. Another good combo is Winstrol and Turinabol. That's good. A good general rule for, if you're going to dose one steroid normally at, say 50 milligrams, if you're going to start putting them together, stacking them together, doing something like 25 milligrams or 30 milligrams, so halving the dosage and then combining with other steroids. So definitely consider in your experimentations combining different types of steroids together. You can really get really strong effects doing that. Being on more different types of steroids at the same time, on lower dosages, but combining lots of types rather than jacking up the dosages of just one or two and running them at the same time. Okay, Nick asks, "Hey bro, love the show, need some advice. I'll be coming off my first cycle in about 4 to 5 weeks. My plan is to take 6 to 8 weeks off to let my body recuperate, and then I want to go back and do a real proper cycle. I have HCG on order and already have plenty of Nolva and Clomid and an aromatase inhibitor. So here's my question. Because I plan on going back on cycle soon, should I just do the HCG for 3 to 4 weeks and then take another 3 to 4 weeks off with no drugs? Or should I also do the Nolva and Clomid? I ask this because I know you've said in the past that PCT drugs like SERMs are not healthy. So I'm wondering if I should save the SERMs for when I come off my second cycle, which there will be several months before I go back on that time." Well, why are you taking the SERMs? I think is why you should ask what you should ask yourself to answer this question. Um, I think one thing that you're concerned about is keeping your natural reproductive system shut off for a long time, so you're wanting to start it back up. So taking HCG alone will do that. It will do that faster and more effectively than taking Nolvadex or Clomid. But Nolvadex and Clomid turn it on from a different angle. HCG communicates directly with your testicles. Nolvadex and Clomid communicate with your brain to make the reproductive system naturally start happening again. As far as your question of, since this is short and you're going to be going back on in about 6 weeks, if you should take them, definitely take the HCG for 3 or 4 weeks, like you're saying, and then when you go off, you'll probably want to take a little bit of Nolvadex just to prevent gyno. Anyways, hold off on the Clomid. I don't think that's necessary. It won't make you feel good, but if you take a few weeks off after that, and if you're ever just feeling like your nipple's sensitive or something, you take Nolvadex on those days. I think that would be fine, and you wouldn't need anything else. You wouldn't need to take a bunch of Nolva and Clomidex. Just save it for the most part. Just use it to prevent gyno during that time when you're taking nothing after the HCG. And actually, when you're taking the HCG too, you'll have estrogen being produced, so you'll need to take some Nolvadex or some Arimidex during that time. Okay, next question is from Sean. Hey Dan, love the podcast. Listened to all the episodes multiple times. Just wondering, when it comes to anxiety attacks on steroids, is this an existing mental state, or is this the cause of high estrogen or a chemical reaction? I'm on 500 tests, 300 equipoise, and it's going on 5 weeks. Had a big anxiety attack and can't seem to get out of this funk. Wondering if there's a solution. Well, I've discussed this a little bit in the past. Steroids increase the stress in your life. They make you more paranoid. They make you more suspicious, things like that. Which, I mean, if you're you're out in the wild and you're an alpha male with high testosterone, it's probably pretty good to be suspicious and to be a little bit paranoid of things, to protect yourself from getting killed by a usurper who wants to become the king of the hill. So, makes sense, man. The steroids, they increase resting adrenaline levels. So your adrenaline is going to be a little bit higher just when you're sitting there. You may even notice a little bit of a trembling or a shake in your hands or your fingertips, simply from taking steroids and having just when you're sitting on the couch doing nothing. You're resting adrenaline. The amount of adrenaline that is in your blood when you're not doing anything is going to be higher when you're on steroids than when you're not. That's also a reason why steroids generally increase blood pressure a little bit from being on them. If you're getting anxiety attacks on it, then you're taking too much for what your brain can handle right now. You may be able to work yourself up to that dosage. You should probably take out the equipoise because it's a not natural hormone, and maybe you don't respond well to that, and you just the test, stay on that and see how it goes. Next cycle, try a different one other than equipoise, and try the same dose of testosterone probably. That could help, but just know that steroids generally do increase stress in your life. Paranoia. If you're getting actual anxiety attacks, though, the best advice is that you're taking too much for what you can handle right now, or you're taking a specific hormone that doesn't agree with you. And my hunch would be that equipoise could be causing you a problem. Maybe it doesn't agree with your mental chemistry, and trading that out for Primobolan, trading that out for Winstrol. those ones don't really have strong mental effects. Anavar doesn't have strong mental effects. Would recommend that. Next question is from Jason. Hey, can you help me? I'm running 1,000 milligrams testosterone, 1,000 milligrams Deca, 25 milligrams of Dbol. What do I need to take to protect myself? I'm just taking over-the-counter estrogen blockers from 5 Star Nutrition. Okay, you need to get a Arimidex or Letrozole or Exemestane to control your estrogen levels. The over-the-counter estrogen blockers are not going to be potent enough. The combination of Dbol test and Deca could cause, significant gyno if you're at all sensitive to it. And at the very minimum, to control the estrogen, testosterone and Dbol both produce estrogen, so you'll need a pharmaceutical aromatase inhibitor, a pharmaceutical anti-estrogen, and those are Letrozole, Arimidex, and Exemestane, Aromacin. For the Deca, you could get prolactin, progesterone-related side effects, and in order to neutralize those, if you get them, you'll need either Cabergoline or pramipexole. So in order to protect yourself, you're going to need to get your hands on one of these two, Cabergoline or pramipexole, and then you're also going to need to get your hands on one of these 3, Letrozole, Arimidex, or Exemestane. If you have those, you can keep running your cycle, and you'll have what you need to take care of side effects if you start to get them. Next question is from Will. He asks, my Cabergoline turned out fake, and now Tren Gyno's sitting in. I ordered more, but it will take a few days, and I'm wondering what to do in the meantime. Would P5P help? Would you go to a doctor? What would you do? Thank you very much. Yeah, the P5P stuff, or vitamin B6, taken at high dosages, has had some scientific research done on it of bringing down prolactin levels, but in the real world, using that in order to control bodybuilding, Tren, Deca related gyno, it doesn't do anything, man. It does nothing, absolutely nothing. So that's not the way to go if guys are wanting to use that instead of a dopamine agonist, pramipexole or Cabergoline. You got to have one of those if you have prolactin, progesterone related side effects, or else it's going to be bad news. Just relying on that. And one thing I wanted to say about science too, because a lot of people hung up on what does science say? Well, so science only knows what science knows, okay? But science is not God. So science doesn't know everything. They're still learning things. There's new scientific discoveries. Science is not a God. They don't know everything. And science only knows what it knows. So everything that science doesn't know yet is not scientific. But that doesn't mean it's not real. That doesn't mean it's not happening. That doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that anecdotally and through experience, people know things that work. And science, because it's a man-made thing, it's not a God, it isn't to that level yet. It's not yet able to explain why that is happening. So never trust science as in like, oh, this is the end all be all. I need to follow the science, and look at these guys, these science guys who they're really into the science and try to do everything very scientific. They're not having the best results following the science. It's a mix with everything in life. This goes, but with bodybuilding, it's a mix of science, experience, anecdote. Gets you the results. So just because something isn't scientific, it hasn't been proved by science to work, it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that science, a man-made study of things, does not yet understand the mechanisms by which this works. So keep that in mind, and that's just something too to help you not be tricked by the religion of science, because it's used in that way. Science is used in this way as a religion to say this is what's true and this is what's not. But it's very tricky, but false, because there is a lot that science does not know, and that doesn't mean that it's false. It just means that it's limited by what man has discovered. And they're not gods. So they don't have all the answers. There are a lot of things that science doesn't know that is true. A lot of things that are true that science doesn't know about yet. They're not the all-powerful gods of knowing in the universe. And just because they don't know about it doesn't mean it's not true. But anyways, yeah. What you say with what would I do if I was in your shoes and I had Tren Gyno, my Cabergoline was fake, I ordered more, but it's going to take a few days. What to do in the meantime? I'd stop taking Tren. I would usually, I always recommend to take Tren acetate, not trenanthate. And one of the reasons for that, other than that just Tren acetate works better and it's more potent, is that if you run into problems, you can stop taking it. And within 3 to 4 days after your last shot, it's gone from your body. So in this situation, if you're using acetate and you're getting Tren Gyno and you can't control it, it's growing, getting bigger, and you're waiting for your Cabergoline, just stop taking it. And within a couple days, it should significantly reduce, because that trenbolone is not going to be in your body anymore 4 days after your last shot. Okay, next question. Samantha asks, hey, I've been listening to your podcast. I've been interested in primobolan and noticed women take a max of 200 milligrams a week, but for men, it's a minimum of 600 to see change in your body. Just curious what you think. Thanks. Yeah. So with women and steroids, the thing that is really under-discussed is what it does to their genitals, okay? So people talk about like, oh, it can make your voice hoarse, which it can. It can make you grow masculine hair, which it can. And another thing that's kind of under-discussed, but that it does do, is it increases the calcium deposits in your bone in sexually dimorphic areas. So it makes your brow ridge, women will grow more bone in their face. The overhang where their forehead and eyeballs, like eye sockets start, it will get thicker there and create that kind of manly caveman appearance, or like more of a transsexual looking appearance there. That's one of the the major irreversible facial changes of women taking steroids. And I'm not saying don't take steroids here. When we talk about women and steroids, we have to talk about what it does, because it's very untruthful and dishonest and deceptive, the information that's out there. And so the other thing is that it really has a strong effect on the women's genitals, okay? So, one thing that they say, and is something that people might know about, they say like, oh, the woman's clitoris will grow, okay? Yes, that's true. It will, very significantly, but also the lips, the inner vagina lips, will also grow. The embryo grows from a unisex that it starts out as, and starts it has in your development when you're in the womb, there's a bud that grows in the genital area that then, depending on hormones that come, then turns it into male genitals or female genitals. And the part on that embryo that corresponds with the male scrotum, the ball sack, is the intervaginal lips of the female, which then has dense male hormone receptors on it. So when you, as a female, take steroids, before there are any type of muscle effects, before there's any type of muscle growing effects, the first thing that they notice is their clitoris being irritated and itching and growing, and their vaginal inner lips growing, becoming more rugged looking, more scrotum looking, and becoming larger, thicker. Another thing that can happen is the inside of their vagina closing and making it hard for something to be in there, because the vagina is kind of closing up, and the space in there is kind of disappearing. So those are the first effects that women get from using steroids. Those that like I mean, I don't. It's very unflattering. It's very unflattering to speak about. It's kind of like unspeakable, and this is why those effects are, not talked about. But I'm not going to sugarcoat anything on this podcast, so that's why I felt that I needed to put that out really clearly there. That within a week, girls who use steroids, male hormones, start experiencing these effects, and not cover stuff like that up, because that's very significant to have major changes happening to your private parts, and then that not being discussed. That's not fair to people that are going to use that. They need to be informed of what can happen. What will happen. All right, so moving on, as far as the Primobolan and what kind of effects that has in women. Yeah, women use injectable steroids. Some of the injectable steroids that women who use steroids, equipoise, testosterone propionate, Primobolan, and some use very small dosages of trenbolone acetate as well. Fast-acting stuff is always going to work better for women, because if it's in and out quickly, then there's less of a sustained effect, a sustained response being sent to the male hormone receptors in the woman's body, making the more sustained the responses, the more that these masculine aspects of using the male hormones are going to be setting in, because it's 24 hours a day. So with the Primobolan, Primobolan injectable is Primobolan enanthate. So when you take that, it's a long acting, and it stays in your body from one injection. It won't go away for a little bit over a week. So it'll just be having those effects long like that. But the type of Primobolan that women use is Primobolan acetate tablets, which is in and out, in a matter of hours. Primobolan acetate tablets, not like the injectable. So it is more. It's less harsh because of that. It's less harsh. It's less persistent in the effects that it's giving. So it's more forgiving as far as side effects have to do with. And then also, if you're getting side effects and you want to stop, and things are going wrong, you can get it out of your system, just by not taking it for a couple days. Whereas with an injectable form of Primobolan, once it's in there, and you can't get it out of you for a few weeks. So side effects have a longer time to sit in. That's why Anavar is a good one for women that want to use steroids. Is that the Anavar is in and out quickly, again, orals. Some women use SARMs too, use low dosages of LGD 4033 or Ostarine, and those can work with them too. They all have masculinizing side effects.
any kind of male hormone. The same way that, if I decided to start taking birth control, estrogen, progesterone tablets, of course I'd start having right away. Of course I would start having female feminizing effects to my body. Before it made my skin more smooth and feminine, if I did that, it would go to the most sensitive areas in my body to female hormone receptors. And what's that? Well, my nipples. Because, those were formed in the body before the sex of the baby was determined. And the hormones associated with that sex started being produced. So if I supplied the female hormones to develop those breasts, they wouldn't become like a woman's breast, but they would become like a not pleasing to look at hybrid of a sort, hybrid of a masculine, feminine chest, a hybrid, what they call bitch tits, gynecomastia in a man. And that would be the first thing that I would notice if I took estrogen, progesterone, birth control tablets. That would, the first couple of days, I'd be like, damn, I feel this in my nipples. And then, more effects would happen over time. More feminizing effects would happen over time. So it's the same thing with the females, is what I'm trying to say. A lot of women. So with women, if you're going to use them, would definitely recommend the fast acting, fast in and out stuff. Tablets are always better than injectables. If you are going to use injectables, use fast acting injectables. So if you use testosterone, it's got to be propionate or suspension. If you use trenbolone, it's got to be acetate. If you use Deca, nandrolone phenylpropionate, NPP, the fast-acting version of Deca, it's in and out in a couple days. It's got to be that one. You don't want to use a long-acting Deca. Tablets are always better than injectables for females because they're in and out in a matter of hours. So Anavar and the tablet version, the primobolan acetate tablet version of primobolan, not the long-acting primobolan enanthate injectable version of primobolan. For women, though, that want to use performance-enhancing drugs to help them, clenbuterol is great. Clenbuterol is great. If clenbuterol isn't enough, doing a little thyroid hormone with it also works good. 25 to 50 micrograms of T3 thyroid hormone. It makes you weaker, but it increases the speed of your metabolism and has a synergistic effect with clenbuterol. The T3 can T3 thyroid hormone can kind of have some anxiety-producing effects, and it can kind of affect your heart rhythm a little bit in some people, but other people don't get those effects. Clenbuterol, I would say, is the best supplement for women. Women, they say, I want to lose some fat, I want to gain some strength, gain a little bit of muscle. Well, clenbuterol can help with both of those. Being on clenbuterol will make you stronger. It'll make you have less water retention in your skin, so you'll look more defined, and it will help you burn fat really effectively. You can do it in cycles, 20 micrograms a day for the first week, 40 micrograms a day for the second week, 60 micrograms a day for the third week, 80 micrograms a day for the fourth week, and then take a 2 to 3 week break and then do another cycle, ramping up like that again. And for most women, clenbuterol is a stimulant. It doesn't have any male hormonal effects, so they'll still get the performance-enhancing effects they're looking for, some increased strength, some increased muscle definition, and help with fat loss without having any masculinizing hormone effects.
If you would like your questions to be answered on the Steroids podcast, go to steroidspodcast.com and leave a comment with your questions, or email or private message steroidspodcast@gmail.com or steroidspodcast on Instagram. Until next time.